Welcome, my friends. How you doing, Mike?
Hey, good morning, Carlos. How are you today?
Very good. It's Friday.
It is Friday, yeah, which for me is football day. So my son's playing high school football this year, and so every Friday is game day, and we're in playoffs right now. They made it through the first round, and now they're into the second round. So, we'll keep hoping that the season keeps going each week.
It's interesting in here. Like I grew up in Puerto Rico, so the whole year is some way somehow warm.
Hmm.
Like I cannot imagine like the kids playing in the middle of winter out. Like it's okay when you play and you have your gloves and your jacket and all that kind of stuff,
Yeah,
but playing football in the middle with just like the little short is I know that they're not shorts, but they're like knee high something and
yeah.
like that's actually
Well,
interesting.
and
You
yeah.
need to have a lot of determination.
Oh, yeah. It gets very cold, and so my son, this is his first year playing, and he's a big kid, so he's playing on the offensive and defensive line. And I worry about him hitting the ground because sometimes they go into hit each other and all that stuff. I bought him long sleeve shirts to wear underneath. Well, he won't wear them because you don't want to have fabric that the other players can grab onto and pull you. So he's
Ooh,
just wearing short sleeves, and it has been pretty cold. It's actually kind of mild here in the Boston area right now, but they're gearing up. They always play on Thanksgiving Day, and that can be very cold, here in the
yeah.
Northeast. So, yeah, it's not the wonderful weather of Puerto Rico or South Florida, but we'll somehow survive here.
That is cool. Um, so definitely this week was interesting. I was close to you. I was in Norwalk doing some work over there. Um, and always thinking about what the business have to do or a company. And I started thinking about this, a strategy. If you
Hmm.
try to do things without a proper strategy, you end up just taking hits and not knowing where you're going to go. So I know that you have
Yeah.
had a lot of experience with that with customers um and I would like that we talk a little bit about that today. Like why do like I as a business owner or as an MSP or a big company, you definitely need to have a cloud strategy.
Yeah, I think there's a certain amount of especially as you're starting out in business and taking on various customers, you try to have a focus for your business, obviously, and what's an ideal customer look like? What are the services you're going to provide to them, and how are you going to deliver that? And do it in at least a break-even fashion. Obviously, you want to move to profitability as quickly as possible. Um, the cloud represents many opportunities, but also many risks for managed service providers, and I think that's some of the more successful MSPs that we see in the industry are those who have very tight focus on what they're trying to do, what they offer customers, and they're willing to say no to some things. Uh, and that's a key piece. And it's kind of like as you build your business, you may feel like you need to say yes to everything because you're just looking for customers and revenue and those kind of things. As you mature as an organization, you can start to get into the point where you say there are some things that we're not willing to do, or some customers we're not willing to take on because we know how this goes and we need to provide a certain service level, particularly in the cloud, whether it's a public cloud, private cloud, hybrid environment, and setting up a service offering that's going to provide the service level agreement that customers are going to demand. Um, they can't see into the future as well as you can, but that's an important piece of the strategy, as you're saying.
You just mentioned something interesting. You need to sometimes say yes to some things and say no to others. And I
Hmm.
think that I remember at times that when working with customers, it's not about saying no because I don't want to service them.
Hmm.
It's what do I want to actually focus myself so I can then understand it, get the value. And we both have worked a lot in the Microsoft space. And one of the interesting things is that when we talk about cloud, there's a lot of clouds. There's clouds in the sky. There's people cloud that are cloudy. But when we talk about cloud, um, I remember working with almost all of them and actually building for some companies different cloud environments. And the Microsoft Cloud, since its inception, it was had something that it interested me a lot. And
Mhm.
it was, how can I allow the partner that is already leveraging, they understand the Microsoft ecosystem, so they can expand it and they don't have to keep doing the mundane task, that they don't have to be focusing on the hardware piece, so they can just move up the scale. Did you get that same feeling?
Yeah, and I think the big advantage that we see in the industry, the funny thing is, after leaving Microsoft, I went to work at GE Healthcare for a year, and GE issues every employee, and this is when it was big GE. They've just announced this week they're going to split into three companies of kind of what's left of the business, but they issued you your SSO login, but then you used it 15 to 20 times a day. So there really was no SSO, right, in the way it was all kind of coming together. Um, so I think if you're an MSP, customers have a diverse set of needs. They're leveraging cloud applications, that are delivered software as a service. They're using on-prem. They're using now maybe things in the Azure cloud. Having a universal set of credentials that I can log into to authenticate users for all of that, and kind of one user model to manage, is really important. And I think, as you're saying, Microsoft, when they first created Azure, really set a good foundation for how the Active Directory can be that identity provider across all of those environments. It's extended to the Microsoft 365 cloud. It's the Azure and Dynamics worlds in Microsoft, excuse me, as well as the ability to spread that out and kind of help authenticate for some of their own first party things that the customer might have. So, the common set of tools, the common understanding of technology and how it works seamlessly, whether it's in the on-prem, the cloud, or the more common hybrid scenario that we see, I think is really important for partners, so that you don't want to get kind of too far over the end of your skis, and from a skill set standpoint, sticking with what's familiar and what works for you and customers is a really important piece.
And that flexibility to allow you to have, let's call, like a hybrid type of environment. You start on premise, the same skills you use on premise, you now move into the cloud. Now you have a transference of knowledge. You don't have to retrain, but now you can do more business,
Hmm.
because I don't have to, oh, how do I do this? How do I do that? So there might be some things that might be a little bit new, but you're like, I call it like layer knowledge. So you learn the first piece that you needed, then you added something, and then you added something else. So, but this piece that you learned initially, you still like AD. Like, I remember going to one of the original presentations when NT40, and I think there was Novell 3.1, I think. And I used to administer both of them, and they
Hmm.
have the tree. And if you remember the icons of AD, like everybody on the presentation said, like, aren't those the Novell icons or something like that? And it was interesting. But then what they did was that the concept, it looked so almost exactly that you can say, oh, I know how to do this in Novell. Oh, now I can do this in this new Active Directory thing that you're bringing.
Yeah.
And in the cloud is the same thing, and it allow you to then expand, so you can use other services and protect. I think the most important thing for a customer, that is their data.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think you obviously want to feel in a position of strength as you support customers and help them reevaluate. And I think you look at what's driving the move. I think obviously SaaS applications drive the move, right? So I was at Microsoft during the time when we introduced the support lifecycle, right, and kind of the standards there, right? There was a time when Microsoft would release a version of software, an operating system or application, and you didn't know how long you were going to get support. You didn't know how long you were going to get service packs and all of those things, right? The cloud's changed a lot of that, because now if you're consuming it through its subscription, it's always up to date. You're getting continuous cycle of improvements and releases and updates and all those kind of new features and the good stuff. Um, but for on-prem software, a lot of people are still kind of in that mode. So I think a lot of what's driving conversations about retiring old hardware and software is kind of the end of support. Partners obviously don't want to be without a safety net, and kind of getting into extended support and then having to pay for those contracts. One of the big benefits of the cloud is being always up to date. Now, you run into some scenarios where that's a good thing, but it's also challenging because if I think about, um, like my dentist, right? My new dentist actually uses cloud-based software to run his dental practice. But in the past, it's applications like that maybe somebody wrote as a Microsoft Access database-based application, right? A local person, they sold it to a bunch of, medical offices or dental offices in the area. And now, but it only ran on Windows, whatever. The person who originally wrote it, maybe they did some things to kind of keep up with it, maybe not. But then the practice kind of gets set in their ways and it kind of works. So they stick with it. Um, now some of those applications are hitting end of life as well. So it's sometimes not even the stuff that Microsoft does, but the applications and things that go on top of it. And again, the MSP, if you're taking on an existing customer or you're taking on a customer, new customer to you, but obviously there's kind of a technical debt that they carry. And so how do you map out kind of what the future looks like and what changes are they willing to make and not willing to make? And again, this is part of the, do you even want to take this customer on based on those kind of decision points? How you help them and advise them to get beyond that obviously is a great opportunity.
And I think that goes directly into the point into who's responsible for what. Because you just identify that when someone built that original database. I remember at one point in time, I was asked to build an Access database to track some information, and it was a technology that was at the time, even though there were Oracle databases and I remember Sybase and SQL, they wanted something small because a lot of times we think that the customer is trying to look for how do I fix the problem right now,
Yeah.
and we need to come on and think a little bit more now. That's why we need to build a strategy. How do I look this long term? And moving into the cloud is interesting because before, in my database, I used to have probably 18,000 servers under my command. And I was responsible with my team to be able to manage, patch,
Hmm.
secure, firewalls, everything. It was under my responsibility. When I started looking into moving into the cloud, that was a completely different ballgame
Yeah.
because now there is what we call a shared responsibility model. Uh, let's dive a little bit in that. So, what is your experience with that, and what you have seen in that area?
Yeah, I think that there's a perception that when you use cloud-based software, like it's inherently safe and secure and backed up, and all those kind and maintained, right? And some of that is true, but a lot of that is not. And if you start looking into uh, where where the issues come from, right? So if you kind of start with the problems and back into, okay, well, who would be responsible for that? Then you can somehow kind of, this is a way I think of coaching customers too, about talking to them about what's likely to happen or where the problems typically come from. I mean, Microsoft has a support model that basically talks about the shared responsibility, where they are obviously responsible for their physical security of the data centers. People think a lot about software and those kind of things, but who has physical access to the servers, who has the admin credentials, right, to go after that platform or infrastructure as a service environment, right? How are they doing security and vetting of their employees and the staff that have physical access as well as admin access and those kind of things. Obviously, they have the Azure layer in the Microsoft world, right, and the security and maintenance of that. But anything that happens on top of that, especially you drop some VMs into it, you're responsible for patching your VMs, for maintaining security, for your backup, for your recovery, for your disaster recovery plan in the event of natural disaster, telecom outage, backups. What if ransomware gets into that or another virus gets in? All of those responsibilities are not on Microsoft. They are on the truly the end customer. But obviously, if they're engaged with a managed service provider, you're supporting that on their behalf, and therefore, there's a certain amount of mindset. Kind of like how would I secure an on-prem environment? How would I offer backup continuity, disaster recovery of an on-prem security, antivirus, ransomware protection, prevention, detection, those kind of things. The notion that because it's in the cloud, you don't need to have a same approach, right, is false, right? You need to have some plan. There are some differences in kind of the approach and the tool set that you might use for that, but the same mindset and planning needs to go into it.
Correct, because it's really important to understand that I used to have to build DR sites to be able to maintain everything.
Hmm.
So if I'm moving to the cloud, part of my strategy is that I cannot forget that there are things that can happen. A patch may affect the application. Some configuration may happen. Someone, not intentionally, let's start with good intentions. Somebody configure something thinking that it was going to be okay, and all of a sudden the app or your data disappear. But then you have the ones that are, hey, I'm going to do this maliciously.
Right.
And if you don't have a plan to maintain the data, I remember Sun, I think that was Sun Microsystems, used to say that if I remember correctly, I think that was that the network connected to the computer was the hub. And it's not about the hardware, like it's what we create with it. I was thinking yesterday, if you're working any company that is working for more than a year and you have a couple of customers, you start generating data based on what you did for that customer, and that customer is depending on you. And if you lose that data, let's say for an hour, and you need to pick up the phone and somebody say, hey, can you help me with this because I have a problem. So, oh, I can because my data is not available. Call me a little bit later. Well, one customer may be okay. Two, but what happened if you actually lose the data because you didn't took the proper controls or understood what you could do? And I think that that's what, like, I was thinking, when you build a strategy, and again, the strategy is not connected to a product. The strategy is what you're going to do in the event that something happened. Products come to support the strategy. And that's something that I always used to make it very clear when I build the strategies for the customers. Like, let's not talk about the product. Let's talk about what we need. When do you need that data back?
Hmm.
Can you survive for, let's say, for 24 hours, 48 hours? And they go, no. Okay. So your recovery point objective and your recovery time objectives need to change. You cannot just try to pay $2 for something that you needed like in 5 minutes, because that means that everything need to be architected to support you.
Right. Yeah, and there's a presentation from DataCon that our Chief Information Security Officer, Ryan Weeks, delivered. And it was a interesting presentation in many ways, but a model that I hadn't heard of from security perspective before is this left and right of boom.
Hmm.
And this may be familiar to some of the folks who are listening and watching, but so what is boom? Boom is it's a series of things that are predictable, and it could be like what you described: hardware failure, software failure, network failure, network outage, um, internal actor who is well-intentioned but makes a mistake, right? Accidentally deletes a directory of files, accidentally deletes something more important. um, then there's the malicious actor, both internal and external, right? Someone who's leaving the company and says, I'm out of here, and you know tries to kind of set things on fire on the way out by deleting a bunch of important stuff. And then there's the external actors, which we know are increasingly targeting not just SMB customers, but targeting MSPs, because they knew if they get into an MSP, they can branch out and hit customers and ransomware them all. So planning for kind of all these different boom events, and what, left of boom is kind of what do you do before to prepare, and right is, what happens if uh, boom takes place, what is the remediation, and to your point, how long does it take to get back up and running, and what's your tolerance for waiting, right? And do you have the right tools in place to give you the ability to recover? And these are complex conversations and complex decisions for both the MSP and for customers, because you start getting into these philosophical issues about, uh, probability versus possibility, right? It's highly likely someone at your work today is going to accidentally delete a file or overwrite a version of a file in, Microsoft 365 or something like that, and want to recover it, right? That's a very likely and easily recovered kind of scenario. The likelihood that someone is going to open an email message, which is then going to unleash a virus that will then ransomware your entire company, maybe that's not possible. The possibility of that happening today might not be as great as kind of the missing file scenario, but it's certainly possible. How probable is it? I'm sure someone is actually figuring this stuff out. Actually, Ryan is probably a guy who has some stats on that from various studies. But that's the kind of thing that, people don't feel like their small business, were potential targets. And I think of it almost in the same way as, COVID, right? When COVID started in March of 2020, it seemed, literally for those here in the US, right, like literally far away, and like people are never going to get that here, or certainly not hundreds of thousands or millions of people. And now look at where we are today as we sit towards the end of 2021. So it's something that, um, unfortunately, these things kind of spread around, become more pervasive, and affect local companies, local businesses, local organizations more and more. And so I think the challenge of the MSP is to not, you don't want to scare your customers, but you want to protect them, and you want to apply a reasonable amount of protection for a reasonable cost, that then is going to set them up for success, and have that plan for left and right of boom, because at some point something's going to happen, a big thing or a small thing, that's going to be the boom, and we want to make sure we've done as much as we can to prepare in a reasonable way, and that we have a path to remediation on the right hand side.
And that's a key when we're building that strategy. You want to look at, okay, when something like that can happen, are you interacting with a lot of customers or partners outside that can probably increase the likelihood of that boom event? If that's the case, your strategy need to have remediation built in. This, okay, if something happened, I need to be able to recover or try to recover in an easy, simple way, to try to get into a state that allow me to say, here's my correct state. Let me now execute my DR plan. Like if there's a disaster that you can say, okay, disaster happened. Now I can take action and be able to say, okay, I migrated to a completely separate environment, a sandbox environment. Let me test everything. Let me make
Mhm.
sure that everything is clean. And now I can reinstate production. Because I think that when you lose data, and that's the part that sometimes we don't realize, sometimes it's gonna take a long time to be able to recreate it. And even if you even have the opportunity to recreate it,
Mhm.
because you think about it, I was thinking yesterday, if you're an accountant and you're running the books for a couple of customers, all that work that you did for months or years, how are you gonna do that? Going all the way back to get all those receipts or everything, you probably don't even have it.
Yeah.
So
And it's
that,
highly
that's
sensitive
important.
information too, right? And so that's the thing that you look at, and kind of what is selling on the dark web these days, right? And kind of what type of information. I mean, nearly everyone's information through all these different, you probably get them like I do, like notification from somebody, um, your, account credentials have been leaked, along with this other kind of personally identifiable information. They're willing to pay for, identity protection kind of service for you for a year or something. Like, if I stacked up all of those, based on the ones that I've received just myself, not doing crazy stuff, just doing normal stuff, right? Subscribe to this website, or a newspaper, or whatever it happens to be, banks, like everybody's giving your information up. So there's a lot of sensitive information that's out there, but this is the kind of stuff that, especially if you work in, like your example, the accountant space, uh, you're in a medical practice. A lot of these are very small businesses, right? They don't have an IT budget per se. They have a budget, right? This is what they run their business on. They're trying to manage costs. Um, Managed service provider working with them, obviously, many specialize in these types of businesses, because if you can figure out kind of a template of how you support a local doctor, accountant, a law firm, those kind of things, you can replicate that and have a scalable model. Um, but one thing that I think, you've spent some time looking at, and maybe this can be our topic to kind of close with, is it's not just managing the technical needs of the SMB customers. There's a whole cost model associated with all of this too that's pretty complicated. So the MSP needs to not understand just the technical capabilities of the tools you're recommending, but some of them have fixed cost models, which are easier to predict. But then there's the variable cost model, uh, where one month you might get the bill and it's this much, and the next month the bill shows up and it's twice as much. So what is your take on that, and kind of how to manage that from an MSP's perspective?
It was great when the cloud started, because one of the biggest challenges internally on a company when you have a big data center is actually to do the charge back to the specific department. So now you are able to say, oh, so now the cloud, you can have a separate account for this department, and
Mhm.
everything that they consume, then you get charged, you pay for it. So for that type of environment, that's a great model, because they have a budget and they pay for it and they could look for it. But looking at when I was working with smaller customers, like you just mentioned, they have a fixed budget. So how do I leverage the cloud or cloud services in an efficient way?
Mhm.
And initially, there was no other way to, let's say, to build a strategy when you had to come back, because the storage cost for this, the network cost for that, the VM here, I need somebody that put it all together, the software. So for one, it was a little bit of a headache. Then when I start building three, four, five, six customers that I had to manage all of that, now I need something stronger than coffee in the morning to try to figure that out.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that that's what, like, I love about um, one of the solutions that we work with is that when you can learn more about how to predictably provide a service that doesn't matter what you have inside, you don't have to figure out how to grow it, how to scale it. It's just okay, it's done for you.
Mhm.
That is the highest level. If you think about it, of consulting, if you think about a consultant, when you bring them in and they bring their expertise, is good. When they can do it for you and then they leave, but they train your team, it's actually a little bit better. But if all of a sudden I can have someone that have expertise in that area, that I can say, okay, you take care of this, then that is the holy grail. Because now I don't have to worry about that. All that I have to do is, okay, I make sure that it's working. If there's a problem, I get an alert, and I
Right.
can have a simple way of managing everything that is golden. That's definitely golden.
Yeah, and I think that's I'm trying to remember which book it was in, or something, kind of way back, but it's the notion of playing to your strengths, right? So
Mhm.
thinking about you as a company, whether you're small or large, you're an MSP or an end customer, or kind of where you sit, but encouraging people to play to their strengths. What are they good at? What is the business that they're in, and letting them focus on it, and then being able to shift those other tasks, like you're indicating, to those who are professionals and have those strengths, and having them manage it on our behalf. I mean, in a simple, scenario, it's like, if you don't want to deal with cutting your grass, there are people who will come and cut your grass on a regular basis and get you squared away, and have your lawn looking good. In the professional world of B2B, right? If I want to have IT services, if I want to be able to focus on my business and have that peace of mind, right? We have a great alliance partnership with Microsoft that we kicked off this year, and a lot of the messaging around that, at least from my point of view, working with them closely, is that Microsoft provides great cloud tools, operating systems, productivity applications, all that great stuff that help customers do their work, because so much of what we create now is digital, right? The digital content, digital assets of an organization. What we do here at Datto, we're providing the tools for MSPs to use to help secure, backup, protect those digital assets of those SMB customers. The combination of all these things lets customers sleep at night, right? Like, I have peace of mind. I can get a good night's sleep, knowing that my business is safe and secure and that someone is keeping an eye on it for me 24/7. That's my MSP partner. MSP partners, hopefully, with the work that they do with us and other vendors in the space, have that same level of confidence so they can get a good night's sleep, knowing that we're all doing as much as is needed to protect those customers. So again, they can focus and play to their strengths on their business. So it all comes together. It's a great partnership among many in this industry, but ultimately, it's just kind of the nature of the environment that we all operate in. So cloud has a lot of opportunities, but there are some new things. To your original point here this morning, having a strategy that you use as an MSP to pursue that, being clear about what those expectations are from a customer standpoint, what customers can expect of you, what you can expect from them, right? Because it's bi-directional relationship. And then what those expectations are for the vendors who support the MSPs like Datto, right? Obviously, we want to make sure that we're super clear about how we support both the MSP and their end customer in the delivery. So, it's an important sequence of events there and how it all comes together. But the strategy, is really the key.
Yeah, that's definitely the the key, and understanding that it's what gonna move you forward. So we have an actual ebook that we dropped in the chat, so you can get a little bit more information in how to actually manage everything. And just click the link. You can then download it and understand how to build a strategy. Will help you to then move your MSP forward and develop more in the cloud. My friends, we hope to see you next week here again at 9 o'clock a.m. Eastern Time, Mike and I, in Tech Conversation Secrets. See you, my friends.